So luckily for me, I cut my bones in opposition to elements of the Oslo process when Arafat would say one thing in Arabic and another thing in English. And there's a long track record of Republicans who are very concerned about the Clinton administration. You talk about pressure or cajoling or negotiating with Arafat, who was the guest of Bill and Hillary Clinton 23 times at the White House. This president rejected all of that. He rejected having the godfather of terrorism come to the White House. The president made it clear that he does support a two-state solution between the Israelis and the Palestinians under certain conditions. That's the roadmap. And the roadmap called for the Palestinians to end the incitement and the training of their kids to hate. It called for opposition to terrorism, and it called for an end to terrorism. And what we saw after the 2000 Camp David meeting, when the Israelis offered 97% of the West Bank and parts of Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state, and Arafat turned away and said no, the best offer they were ever going to get. That's when the American, I think bipartisan consensus came to be, there is no Palestinian partner for peace. Some of us thought so long earlier, but many of us certainly believed it after Camp David. The president exchanged letters with the Israelis and said, there are now facts on the ground and we will not pressure Israel to go back to the 49 armistice lines or the pre-67 or post-67 lines. That has been the president's foreign policy regarding the Palestinian state. Frankly, you're trying to come from the right, but usually Democrats come from the left. Oh, they complain, the Americans haven't been engaged enough in pushing the Palestinians and the Israelis into peace efforts. Now, to the part about Rudy Giuliani and Mitt Romney and others who've talked about a Palestinian state, because this is the rebuttal to a statement you made in your opening, which is that all the Republicans are in favor of the Annapolis Conference. Rudy Giuliani, in his Foreign Affairs article, Toward a Realistic Peace, suggested that immediate negotiations for Palestinian-Israeli peace were not in the interests.
I got to, there's an emergency. Whoever has a Toyota Tercel white with a 4SH is going about to be towed.
I'm not familiar with that question. Can you give me?
Yeah, sorry.
Luckily, nobody got up.
Right.
Good. In his Foreign Affairs article, Mayor Giuliani said, the Palestinian people need decent governance first as a prerequisite to statehood. Too much emphasis has been placed on brokering negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, negotiations that bring up the same issues again and again. It is not in the interests of the United States, at a time when it is being threatened by Islamic terrorists, to assist in the creation of yet another state that will support terrorism. Final thought, because I believe it deserves an honest answer. As regarding the Palestinians and the Annapolis Conference, since I laid out for you the ideology and the statements and the record of the president in support of Israel and his confrontation of anti-Semitism, some people here have been in the room when the president gets on the phone, yells at Arab leaders or European leaders, tries to knock heads and tell people to cool it on the Israel bashing. I believe what's going on regarding Annapolis is the attempt to create a Gulf state alliance to confront the Shias in Iran. The president is getting phone calls from the, quote, moderate Arab regimes. He got the phone calls from Tony Blair, who he promised he would send as the envoy, the international envoy, to try to make progress in the Arab-Israeli dispute. The president has now downgraded the conference in Annapolis. He's not going to pressure the Israelis. He said that he'll stand by Israel in all of its negotiations. The Israelis will have to make up their mind. A better phrasing of the question would be, to Ehud Olmert, what does he have in mind? If the president had said to Olmert, I don't want our State Department to get involved in brokering discussions between Fatah and Abbas, as opposed to Hamas in Gaza, then we would have heard the argument again from the left. Why isn't the administration supporting Israel in its efforts to have negotiations? Israel does this regularly. Every prime minister, from Bibi and Shamir to Rabin and Barak and Olmert, wants to have conversations with the Palestinians. I'm very comfortable. I trust the president. Annapolis has been downgraded, and I think it has to do with creating an alliance and a conversation for these states as they all seek to together oppose Iran.
The Democratic and the Republican Party platforms both support a two-state solution. I would also point out in all of this that everyone made clear that originally that it should be up to the Israelis. And Ehud Olmert got up and said, I said I would not negotiate for peace unless I felt I have a partner for peace. And I feel I have a partner for peace in Mahmoud Abbas. This is a decision for the Israeli people to make. And in the meanwhile, we should do everything we can to support to support the Israeli government and what it's doing. And that means being consistent in that support. The Bush administration originally was opposed to the security fence, and then very suddenly they became for it. Only 2 presidents have ever filed complaints in the United Nations about human rights violations by the Israelis, Richard Nixon and George W. Bush. Over and over again, you hear the rhetoric on one side and the actions don't match up. This is yet another example. When they'll stand by Israel when it furthers their agenda, but when it comes time to doing what's best for Israel at the Israelis' request, they're never there.
I don't know why you'd say they're never there. The United States just increased its foreign military sales to Israel to $30 billion, so it would keep its qualitative military edge. While we're building this alliance with the moderate Arab states, including arms sales, yes, to Saudi Arabia, which you mentioned in your opening. First, we checked the arms sales with the Israelis who signed off on it, including for the JDAMs, which is the special missile. And when we have the relationship with the Saudis, who are going to buy their weapons from somewhere, because guess what? They're afraid of the Iranians. It's better that we have the relationship military to military. But since we were selling arms to an Arab state, the Saudis, the Americans increased dramatically the arms sales to Israel. Nobody claims from the Democratic side of the aisle that I've ever heard that the United States alliance with Israel isn't strategic and moral and hasn't been wildly supported by Republicans. This would be a good moment to summarize and say, poll after poll comes out between the parties at the grassroots level. Do you support the state of Israel? 84% is usually the number, 84 to 90%. Republicans support the Jewish state. That number has now fallen below 50% among Democratic activists. And so we have a clear difference between the parties on support of Israel. There are and have been good Democrats who support Israel, but for instance, when one of them runs for re-election for Senate, it's the left and the anti-Israel, which is now strong enough in the Democratic Party, to defeat him. Joe Lieberman, hero of the Democratic Party, hero of Jewish Democrats, is now the hero of Jewish Republicans, and still a few Jewish centrist Democrats.
To Andrew, isn't it a sign of disrespect for Jewish voters that the Democratic Party continues to honor Jimmy Carter, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and others who are anti-Israel? What will it say to Jewish voters when such people are honored at next year's Democratic convention?
Well, let me say 2 things. As soon as the Republicans stop honoring folks like Ron Paul, stop honoring Darrell Issa, Dana Rohrabacher, and Ray LaHood, who used to be chair of one of the chairs of the Intelligence Committee, we can talk about this. It is a fallacy to say that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party is controlled by anti or pro-Israel elements. And I brought up what I said before. The Democratic Party alone passed a resolution opposing divestiture from Israel. Republicans have been silent on this issue. Now, look, Jimmy Carter has been a sore disappointment to many of us, but also including the leadership of the Democratic Party. When Jimmy Carter came out with his book, Nancy Pelosi, Howard Dean, Harry Reid all came out with statements condemning Jimmy Carter and the premise of his book for what he was saying. I don't hear the Republicans doing the same when you have Ann Coulter saying she wants to perfect all of us.
Larry. Okay. All right, Larry, yeah. Larry.
So,